right now, guys, girls, it's a busy time out there. And just connecting with the right people, getting the right connections and making some money because it's out there to be made. So, all right. We went through listings last week. We started. I want to see if I'm in order. What was number 1? We numbered these last week, right?
Agency disclosure.
Agency disclosure. Those 3 pages were number 1. You might want to put those on your page, upper right-hand corner. Number 2 was what?
Designated agency
Okay.
addendum.
3?
Affiliated business arrangement disclosure.
Okay, let's see if we can let her catch up. It should be the right order.
Yeah, that's figuring.
The easiest way to do it is turn it over.
Yeah, you're right.
That's kind of what I would do.
It's a long morning already.
I've done this once or twice. Homeowner Association was 4. America's Preferred was 5. These are all the ones we went through last week. We cruised last week.
Too bad you got to go over it again.
In another couple months, I'll be right back on it,
No.
starting all over. Is that where we ended off, or did we do lead base?
I think we did talk about the lead base.
Did we?
Didn't we have like an argument about it?
Can't remember.
You guys,
Oh,
We could start there.
was that?
was it, what, right, or no? About letting people know about the lead base and
Yes,
stuff like that?
yes.
Yeah, so I think we did talk about it.
Yes. So, Dave, you have that in yours?
Yeah, I
Did we
marked-
talk about it?
I have marked as number 6, but I don't have notes on it, so I'm not sure how much we actually got through.
Were you here last week?
No, no,
Okay.
she was at that.
Who was arguing with me?
The nice lady sitting right here, I don't
That
remember
guy.
her name.
Kavita?
No.
Wasn't Tina.
um,
Tina?
And it wasn't Tina.
I'm
Was it-
surprised it wasn't Tina.
Wyvonia, maybe?
Yeah,
Is that her name?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, we were having our discussion on agents or lead-based paint. What you looking at, Kavita? Are you?
I don't think I.
You need a whole new package, girl? Oh my God! No wonder the way you got your papers all over. You guys realize every time I print stuff, it goes to my account. I'm telling you.
Sorry.
I'm gonna start charging for copies.
I had $1.
Multiple copies. Yeah, we talked about lead-based paint last week, and just real quick, because I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. Our argument was, when you get to the bottom of it from a purchaser's point of view, you can check one of 2 boxes. Is it all coming back, you know, Dave? Receive.
Yeah.
Receive a 10-day opportunity or mutually agreed upon period to conduct a risk assessment of the inspection of the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards, or waive the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment or inspection of the presence. Lon, what do you put check there? Or what do you have down check? Which seems to be the norm.
Yeah, if it was built before '78, then 9 times out of 10 it's going to be there, so we want to uncover something that we know, more than likely.
Which changes things dramatically. Now,
Sure.
our agent here last week was talking about, which on a normal inspection, if you're not sure if somebody wants to have an inspection, always check they want an inspection, because they don't have to have an inspection, right? But if you check, no, they don't want an inspection, they can't change their mind. So that was the argument we had with this. She's saying she always checks or has them check the top one. What's the problem with that?
Sellers don't want to subject the house
Yeah.
to it.
If I'm the listing agent and Dave's my client, I've got to explain to Dave what the problems are if you accept that offer. Because now, if they do a lead-based paint disclosure, or they do a lead-based paint test, and there's an issue, the seller now has to disclose that, right? In which could be an issue. And her point was, well, I want to make sure I'm protecting my client. Well, sometimes people try protecting their clients so much that, what's the ultimate goal?
Sell the house.
Or, if you
Buy the
represent
house.
the buyer, buy the house, right? The seller may say, you know what, no, that's not gonna happen, we're not gonna take your offer. Because we don't wanna have that scenario. And what you need to do as the buyer's agent is explain to the buyer that when you go to sell, if you had that test done, it might be okay for you, but it might limit how many people actually wanna buy your house then, right?
It's attached.
Right. It's a sticky, how's that for the word? So it's just kind of an interesting thing. Not to tell, you can't tell your client what to do or what not to do, right?
Right.
What's your job?
To educate them.
And to give them, if I do this, this is what happens, and if I do this, this is what happens. Then they need to educate, advise, all of those things are correct. But you need to make sure you're educating and advising, and what are the ramifications, okay? So, with the lead-based paint, it's a little different, a little different scenario. So that's all we're gonna talk about lead-based paint, because that's just kind of finished up where we were last week.
Without going into great depth, what, on I, what do we check, just so I have it?
One?
Yes, I wonder what it is. Oh, it is one, sorry, yeah.
Well, what do we check as a seller?
Is it the third one? Seller has no report to register change in that.
They don't.
In 23 years, I can't remember if the lead-based paint goes back to that point or if it came in after. I've never seen anybody check they have knowledge. Okay? Not to say, if they do have knowledge, they need to check it. But I've just personally never seen that they've had knowledge. So in most cases, you're going to sign in the box under one, both boxes. You realize that? Okay, the seller's going to sign your initial, next to A and next to B. The difference is, what are they checking? Which box to the right of that? If they check A, if they check the top box, known lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazard are present in the housing, under B, they're probably going to check the top one there too, right? If they check the bottom one in A, they're probably checking the bottom one in B. If seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards in the housing, obviously they have no reports, right? So usually you're checking the tops in both of them and the bottoms if you're not. So in most cases, you're checking the bottom.
May I ask you a question before you
may.
move on?
That's what we're here
So say it becomes known that they do have lead-based paint in the house, from then on, they do have to disclose it, right? Like on like something like this, okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting, and I just thought about this as you were talking about that. Anybody sold a hut house that had lead-based paint in it, where they've actually disclosed that? Because that's one of the things they will do, is now if there was lead-based paint, if it's a problem, they're going to correct the problem. Now, I guess the question then becomes, since now you own it, because you're aware of it when you buy that house, if you have to disclose that, because I don't know how they're fixing it. I don't know if they're taking it out, so in reality there is no lead-based paint, or they're taking out a section that's lead-based paint, meaning that the rest of the house probably still has it. In which case, you would probably have a report at that time as the buyer. So when you went to sell, you might have it. So moral of the story is, don't sell HUD homes with lead-based paint problems. How's that?
Since you haven't really seen a lot of it, I mean, in your experiences, does that really put buyers off?
I think it's the ask but don't tell. If somebody said I wanted to buy a house in downtown Northville, would we all agree that there's lead-based paint in pretty much every one of those houses since they've been 100 years old?
Right.
Yeah. But if all of a sudden somebody sees it on paper that there's lead-based paint,
Gotta get freaked out.
I think some people are going to have a problem with that. Some people it's not going to matter. To me, it wouldn't matter one way or another if I was buying it, because I know that there's, lead-based paint there. So, but I think when anything's on paper, people tend to get a little bit more careful or worry a little bit more. All right. So we're down to lead-based paint. What do we got left here? Do we have a total? Showing time appointment center form.
You don't want to do disclosures after lead-based paint?
Well, good.
After you're already kind of in that mode with those.
We'll go with that one. I'll let Dave change the curriculum here. Seller's disclosure statement. Who fills out the seller's disclosure statement?
They do.
What's that?
They do.
Hence the term seller's disclosure statement. You really shouldn't write the address on it. However, if you're doing dot loop, it's going to go on there automatically. Realize if you're working with a for sale by owner, they need both of those forms. They need the lead-based paint form and the seller's disclosure. So they probably don't know they need those forms. So if you're working with someone and trying to get them to list, that's something you could give them to provide them a value or to build some rapport with, right? Now the seller's disclosure statement, state or federal form?
Sellers is a federal. That's it.
Michigan Association, I don't know.
Lead base is a federal,
That's state.
state is or seller's disclosure is a state. Now I'm assuming that most states probably have a seller's disclosure. This one is separate to Michigan. What happens if a buyer never gets this form?
They can walk at any point and get their EMD back.
They could be sitting at the closing table and all of a sudden, I never got a seller's disclosure statement, I want out of the deal. And you can kill the deal right then and there and they get their money back. What if Dave is an agent, Lon's the seller, Dave calls me up, it's my listing, and he goes, hey, I noticed that your seller's disclosure isn't online. Can you send it to me? I send it to Dave, Dave forgets to give it to Lon. Can Lon kill the deal?
No.
No is the right answer, but you guys have to expand on his answer. Why can't Lon kill the deal?
Because it's my fault for not.
Michigan is very clear. What the agent knows, the client knows. So if Dave's got that information,
My
it's
fault.
we can assume Lon has it. Now, Lon may not be happy. What's Lon's recourse?
Sue me.
To go after Dave.
Sorry, Dave.
Now it's interesting. I want to pull up an email real quick. I glanced at it while I was driving yesterday, which probably shouldn't have done while I was driving, but whatever.
At least you only glanced at it. As long as you
That's
didn't
true.
read the whole thing while you were driving.
That is true. Let's see if this is it. Yeah, this is it. This is from RealComp, rat thinking on one of our agents. In an effort to maintain, simplify, and streamline full disclosure, our MLS policy requires all listings to have associated disclosure and addendums uploaded with the listing at the time of the input. If no such items are available, or if the seller does not want the disclosures listed, a letter stating they must be uploaded in place and blah, blah, blah. If no documentation is attached to a listing, a fine may be levied. So, I have to deal with an agent in the office, but I thought that was a perfect teaching moment since that came in yesterday afternoon. So, if you don't put your disclosures on, you can get fined by RealComp.
I know a lot of people that haven't, I mean, I've seen a lot of listings that don't have that listing docs, so what makes RealComp hit some agents and not? 'Cause they.
I'm not sure why that happened.
You can report it
Yeah,
to RealComp.
That's the difference.
That's the rat finger.
somebody rat thinks on you. I gotta tell you something.
Oh yeah, I did it. Someone put a listing up.
We
and didn't show
need
for 3
to,
days.
and I'll be the first one, I screw up and don't get him in on time. So I'm not gonna sit here and tell you I'm perfect. Working, I'm not there. We as agents do have to self-police ourselves. Because if we don't, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and what's allowed to go on. So if you see something that's not right, call RealComp and, mention it, okay? Purpose of the statement. The statement is a disclosure of the condition of the property in compliance with the Seller's Disclosure Act. The statement is a disclosure of the condition and information concerning the property known by the seller. Unless otherwise advised, the seller does not possess any expertise in construction, architecture, engineering, or any specific and related to the construction or condition of the improvements of the property or the land. Also, unless otherwise advised, the seller has not conducted any inspections of generally inaccessible areas such as the foundation or roof. This statement is not a warranty of any kind by the seller or by the agent representing the seller in this transaction, and is not a substitution for any inspection or warranties the buyer may wish to obtain. They cut the seller slack. I mean, if the typical seller doesn't know anything about the foundation, the typical seller may not know anything about the roof. If you fill out the seller's disclosure and somebody moves into the property and there's a conflict in what the seller said and what the buyer sees, can the seller get sued? Taking away, the seller can get sued on everything or whatever. Should the seller be worried?
No,
Expand on that.
because the seller is given, not the seller, the buyer is given the opportunity to do a full inspection and everything like that. And then if he goes through and buys the house, after that, unless it was something that they intentionally hid, that's the
key.
Right.
If the seller lies on something and you can prove it, the seller's in trouble. If the seller makes a claim and they thought it wasn't an issue, then you can't. It has to be that they lie. Okay? Now, proving the lie obviously could be difficult. The easy one to me would be there's water in the basement, right? And buyer calls, can't figure out the problem is, and I say water in the basement coming up from, let's say, the sewer. Buyer calls the local plumber, and the local plumber says, hey, I come out here once a month, and the seller said they've never had water problems in the basement. That's something that you probably just got caught lying on, okay? But if just because something happens after close and the seller didn't disclose it, what can you do? Let me ask you, here's a what if. Neighborhoods that have a lot of trees, older homes, Royal Oak, Ferndale, this is very common on that side of town. They don't get water in the basement, but what do twice a year? Yeah, they snake the drain. Does that need to be disclosed?
I would, I guess, I don't know.
To be on the safe side, I probably would. I would just put in there, drain gets snaked once a year for preventive maintenance. Because there's nothing worse. You don't tell them, and the thing backs up. Then you're fighting a potential argument. It's better to be safe than sorry. You're walking through the house, right? When you go to list it. Lon's my client, he's the seller, and I'm walking through the house. He's pointing everything out. We get done, we sit down, we're filling out all the paperwork, I'm listing the property. And down on number 1, all the way at the bottom, basement, has there ever been evidence of water? Can I see Lon's checks? No. Although when we were walking through your basement, Lon, there was standing water right by the drain.
House full.
Yeah. Nothing on the floor, towels floating up, downstream. And I say, Lon, what are you talking about? Or what would you guys say?
Noticed that you checked no water in the basement, but when we're down, kind of saw a little water. You want to expand on your answer?
Don't worry about it, Lon. I'm going to take care of it.
Well, actually, we still have to disclose it. Even if we take care
But
of it.
somebody might not want to buy the house then.
And that may be true, but we also don't want to be in a situation where we're dishonest and then they find out and we're in deeper trouble later. So it's best to put it out there, let them know we're taking care of it.
Screw you, Lon. We're leaving it the way I have it.
Okay, well, unfortunately, as much as I would love to work with you, I can't work under those false pretenses. So
That is exactly what you need to do,
Good luck
and you
with
should
selling
do.
your home.
If someone's gonna live with them, I mean, it's, no listing, and I keep telling you guys this, is worth your reputation. No buyer is worth your reputation, right? You know, so that's exactly what you guys need to do. Just don't deal with it. I mean, walk away. So, back up top. Seller's disclosure. The seller discloses the following information with the knowledge that even though this is not a warranty, the seller specifically makes the following representation based on the seller's knowledge at the signing of this document. Upon receiving the statement from the seller's agent is required to provide a copy to the buyer or the agent of the buyer. The seller authorizes its agents to provide a copy of the statement to any prospective buyer in connection with the actual or anticipated sale of the property. The following are representation made solely by the seller and are not representations by the seller's agents, us. This information is disclosure only and is not intended to be part of any contract between the buyer and the seller. That's the part I have a problem with this statement. Why is that?
Because it's one of those required documents, and so if it's required, then. I don't-
Pretty much, I mean, if you don't have it, the guy can kill the deal.
Right.
So how is this not part of a contract? I mean, to me, it doesn't make sense. I think it's a complete contradiction. And it actually, when it comes down here, I'll show you. Seller, answer all questions, report known conditions affecting the property, attach additional pages with your signatures if additional space is required. Complete this form yourself. If some items do not apply to your property, check not available in bold letters, and I'll tell you about that in a second. If you do not know the facts, check unknown. Failure to provide a purchaser with a signed disclosure statement will enable a purchaser to terminate an otherwise binding purchase agreement. How that line doesn't contradict with the last line of the paragraph ahead, I don't understand. Although it is a government form, so that probably explains it. Very clear, in bold. If you don't have it, or caps I should say, you can walk away from it. Look up here for a second, don't cheat. The appliances aren't staying with the house. Do you have to check that the appliances are there?
No.
Yes.
Who said no?
You don't check that they're there, you check the, it's a box on there that says that they're not available or some one of those, or something like that.
Okay, couple things. If they're gone, obviously out of the house, you do that. Come up here, young lady. Why do you want the forms? I would never do that. My name's not Brent. Oh, hold on. Come here, come here, come here, come here.
I've got the worst day.
Already? It's only 9 o'clock.
Thanks.
The issue becomes, if the appliances are in the house, you do have to respond if they work or not. Okay? Even if they're probably not staying with the house. And the reason being is, would you guys agree everything has a price?
Yeah.
And if everything has a price, and I'm interested in buying your appliances, what do I want to know?
They work.
If they work, right? Doesn't mean they're staying, it's just asking if they work. All right? So, when I explain this form to people, and invariably 95% of the people butcher this form, you realize that. Either that or I don't know how to explain something. And I tell people exactly this. Most of your answers are going to be yes or not available. Very few, what does no mean?
Don't work.
You have it, but it doesn't work, right?
That's correct.
Very few things in the house you have that don't work.
Sure.
There is a greater chance you don't have it, hence the not available. Or yes, you have it and it works. So most of your checks are going to be left or right. If somebody doesn't know, unknown's a fine answer. Who has to fill out a seller's disclosure?
So,
Okay, let's expand on that. Does a landlord who owns the property never lived in it have to fill it out?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct. When this thing came in, everybody was famous for just writing "never lived in" across and signing it. Not the right answer. I'm a landlord. Do you think I know something about my properties? I may not know everything about my properties, but I should know something about them.
So we know what problems they have,
Right.
'cause that's calls you get.
So in most cases, you can, if you're a landlord, you have to fill it out. And you want to write unknown in a lot of, have at it, but you still have to fill it out. Builders don't need to fill it out, and banks don't need to fill it out. Trustee, trusts,
Yes.
what's the difference between a trust and, let's say, an executor?
An executor is for a will, and a trust would have a trust with trustee or,
But let's put it in people talk.
a will would be in probate for a really long time, a trust is usually immediate.
Well,
Pretty close.
an executor could be, I may know Dave in passing, but for some dumb reason, he decided when he dies, he wants me to disperse his stuff. I don't know anything about the house, right? That one is allowed to say, never lived in executor, or whatever you want to put, and sign it. A trust can be held by a living person, correct? I can put my property in a trust. So just because it's in a trust doesn't mean I get to not fill it out. I still have to fill it out. All right, appliances. The items below are in working order. The items listed below are included in the sale of the property only if the purchase agreement so provides. I have fought with agents from other companies about they don't know how to fill this out. Okay. Just because you check here, the range works, doesn't mean it's included in the sale of the house, right? Unless it's what?
PA.
Or built in too. If it's built in, yeah, then it
Yeah.
stays. But if it's on the PA, it stays. So, same thing with the dishwasher, pretty much, it's gonna stay all the time, unless you got one of those fantastic rolling ones that you can hook up to the sink.
So would you push yes and not available, or just?
No,
okay,
it's just yes.
Okay.
It's just yes. Remember, it's just asking if it's in working order, not if it's staying with the house. Now, if it's already pulled out of the house, obviously it's not available. So you go down through this whole thing and you ask the questions in wood burning system, and then right above it, it has fireplace and chimney. So that's kind of a contradiction. Not a contradiction, but fireplace and chimney is probably more, could be construed as like for your furnace where your stuff goes out. Wood burning system, yeah, it could be an actual chimney, or it could be a hot belly stove sitting in the family room. So you just have to put it, put it in there. Let me ask you this: if let's say there's a leak in the house and it's around the windows. I'm pretty confident if you looked at this form, it doesn't say anything about windows. Does that need to be disclosed?
Yes.
It would.
I would
If-
say no.
If it's not on the form, it still has to be disclosed. If you know of a potential problem, it has to be disclosed. Whether or not it's specifically asked for here. Those have been lawsuits. Okay, so if you know of an issue that's not specifically here, you might want to write it in or put down another sheet. I mean, leaking around windows could very easily cause a mold problem, right? So there is some common sense involved with this, which most people don't have. Because if you wanted to list everything in the house, how many pages could this thing possibly be? So you do have to have some common sense. Unless otherwise agreed, all household appliances are sold in working order except as noted, without warranty beyond the date of closing. So that's the protection of I bought a house and the dryer crapped out the next day. Too bad. So sad you lose. property conditions, improvements, and additional information. Has there ever been evidence of water? Yes or no? If yes, please explain. I mean, we live in Michigan. Most basements at some point in time have had water. Okay? What causes the majority of water issues in a basement? Anyone know?
Sewer backups.
That's one. Not coming from necessarily the floor, but water in the basement too.
Lack of the sump pump?
Some pump just gets it out. and comes
Sump
in.
pumps are, you know, it's funny, I'm not sure the sump pump is the greatest thing that everybody maintains. Landscaping, grading, gutters, all of those things are what definitely messes up. Because if the landscaping, or not the landscaping, but if the grading slopes back towards the house, you're gonna have problems. Usually you can solve most basement problems by changing the grading and putting downspouts on your gutters. So, little FYI.
How much does it cost?
I can't hear you when you're talking to your
How
mouth
much?
or your hand
How much does it cost?
to,
Is it ready?
oh, depending how, you know, is all you're trying to do is if, here's the, you just want to slope it away. It's not a big deal. It's more of an effort than a cost.
So basically, they just push, they don't add, do they add dirt or they push?
In
more
most
dirt up?
cases, you're adding dirt, so it slopes away.
Well, and on the concrete side, you don't have to replace, you can get a mud jacking company to drill holes and then use like this hydraulic stuff that will.
Push it up.
Let the
there.
cement so it
Yeah.
slants now away from it. You never want anything slanting towards the house. That's not a good thing. So whether it's, like Dave's saying, against the cement driveway or the dirt, you know, get your gutter extensions out. So,
The
but
best way is to dig up and put bleeders in your lawn and then have the, so you don't even have the water on the surface, it just goes on into the field.
Right.
But that costs.
when you're dealing with stuff like that, it's just, it's not necessarily a huge cost, it's just getting someone to do the work. You can do it yourself. Kavita, when you're doing that, call me so we can all come watch you doing the landscaping. Insulation, describe if known. Most people don't know they may know that it's rolled in the attic or blown in. That's about all you're gonna get. They don't know how much is in there. Urea foam formaldehyde insulation is installed. Yes, no, unknown. Anybody know what that is?
It's the stuff before they changed it, it's, what's the cause?
It's a cancer causer, but
Yeah.
it's funny, it's very similar to products you can get now at Home Depot where you spray it in as a liquid and it becomes a foam. But that's what this was. They sprayed it into the walls back in the 70s for insulation. And they found out it was a cancer causer, supposedly. But it's it's dissipated since that time. It's probably not an issue anymore. And a lot of it is just disintegrated too.
Sure.
But that's what urea foam. Most people would not know if they had urea foam formaldehyde because it was only done in the 70s. And when you stop and think about that, that's so far away. Depressing as that may seem for us older people. It's 45 years ago, potentially. Right?
Just born, maybe.
No, dude, I was around a little longer than that. But thanks. All right, roof leaks. Approximate age, if known. Now let me ask you something. We didn't start with this. On this disclosure, how far back does the seller have to go?
From the time they own it? Oh,
Correct.
Yeah.
It's only the time they've owned it. So if somebody says like on the roof, approximate age. If Lon's owned the house for 6 years and he's not done nothing to the roof, he doesn't really know how old the roof is, right?
You don't want to disclose if you bought it and they told you we did it 3 years ago.
Right.
You don't want to say 9 years ago.
Unless you specifically had
Yeah.
the warranty paper or the paper from the roof, then you can, but don't hang yourself by trying to get too many answers, if that makes sense. Just answer it to the best of your knowledge since you've owned the property. Well, type, diameter, age, and repair history. For most of the homes you're going to put, what are you going to put there? NA, not applicable. Has the water been tested, yes or no? If yes, take date of last reports and results. I mean, if you're selling a house out by itself lying, there's a good chance it might have a well. So you do need to answer that question. But again, most people don't know how old, the well is, or how deep the well is, or anything like that. Any
So-
questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. So if you put NA because you don't have a well, with the water testing question, do you answer it?
I would just put no. Or, you know what? Actually, you're probably right. I just leave it blank. Because if
Okay.
the one above says NA,
And then results would be NA.
Right.
But some just, okay.
because most people, if they don't have a well, aren't testing their water. All right. Page 2 of the seller's disclosure. Septic tank, in most cases, NA. Here's a little story that Jim and Donna Nora had this problem on a house in Livonia. Right over, I think it was north of Plymouth Road in Inkster, right on the far eastern side of Livonia. Most people would say that every home in Livonia is on city water and city sewer.
That little cinder block.
I don't know what it was, but it could have been. And was it, I don't know who bought it, was
If it was the last, if they did it 2 years ago.
probably, maybe a little longer. They just assumed it was city water, city sewer. Guess what? It was on septic. So it was kind of a goofy scenario to where they didn't know till I think after the buyer moved in is what I think ended up happening, or something along those lines. If you're not sure, actually public records will tell you in most cases if it's septic or public sewer. There's a lot of houses in Farmington Hills that are still on septic.
So if it's a bank owned and you don't get one of these, is it your responsibility to figure everything
Figure
out?
out, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And as the agent, what's your responsibility? To help the client to get as much information as possible, right? There's ways to tell in a basement if it's septic. Depending on where the sewer line is going out, you can usually tell.
It's on the back of the house.
If it's going out the back wall and it's about halfway down the wall, the odds are it's probably a septic. It should be our next little thing, a house with septic and a house with sewer. Maybe we'll arrange that one. But in most cases, it's going to be NA on the septic. What do most people have for heating systems?
Forced air.
Usually it's gas forced air. If it has baseboards, then it's not gas forced air. Radiant flooring. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of heat. You just need to figure out what they have. Plumbing systems. You'd be surprised how much, now this is supply line they're talking about, not sewer line. Does that make sense? Water coming in as opposed to waste going out. So plumbing system, is it copper, is it galvanized, is it other? You be quiet for a second. You guys heard the term PEX? What's PEX? It's not my muscles either.
Plastic.
It's either red or blue in most cases. Been around for the last 5 or 6 years probably. Much cheaper than copper, much easier to use for plumbers. A lot of people think it's much cheesier too, but because those are people that have had copper their whole life. Came into being a lot when they started to use it a lot more when people were, all the foreclosures, and people were just stealing the copper out of houses. So there's no value to PEX, let's put it that way. So that would be under the other category. And it's possible to have probably all 3 of them in a house. Copper, galvanized, other. So it doesn't mean that one's just a 1. Any known problems. You know, if there's a leak, those are the type of things you need to put down. Does, you know, the faucet leak, does the hot water heater leak, something leaking on the plumbing system. Electrical system, any known problems, same thing. You got a breaker that doesn't work, or receptacle that constantly blows. History of infestation, if you left a piece of food out and one ant came to the table. No, that's not what they're looking at. They're looking at termites in Michigan are not that common. More than likely you have carpenter ants if you've got an issue. Environmental problems. Are you aware of any substances, material, or products that may be an environmental hazard, such as, but not limited to, asbestos, radon gas, formaldehyde, lead-based paint, fuel or chemical storage tanks, and/or contaminated soil on the property? I mean, if they have a radon mitigation system in their basement, they probably should be checking there's a radon issue. Craig Lee, I don't know if you guys, when Craig took us out on our little tour, I learned a little bit about radon. Everyone is always, at least I have always thought that radon is one and done. Let's say you check your radon in your basement today and there's no problem.
Time of year, right?
Time of year, and it can change year to year. It's never I don't know if static is the right term. It can change. It does have, the issue that it will change. So you might, and I never knew that. So you might want to just, check into that or whatever, if you believe radon is an issue. Some people don't. I'm probably closer to the some people don't than it is an issue. Okay? Before we go on, what is your definition of proximity?
For me, within sight.
Kavita, how about you? In sight, 5 feet away, a mile away? Hello?
Proximity applies to time and space, though.
Stephanie, how about you?
I agree with Dave.
Okay.
What'd you say?
Proximity applies to not only space, but time.
Okay, we're going to come to proximity in a minute. Features of the property shared in common with adjoining landowners such as walls, fences, roads, and driveways, or other features whose use or responsibility for maintenance may have an effect on the property. Does a fence between two neighbors have an effect on the property? In my mind, no. Okay? So make sure people read the statement all the way through, because they might say, oh my God, yeah, we share a fence. Any encroachments, easements, zoning violations, or non-conforming uses. What's funny is most people put no, but pretty much every house has an easement, doesn't it? A utility easement?
Yeah.
33.
But nobody stops and thinks about that when they're doing it. Any common areas, facility like ponds, tennis courts, walkways, or other areas co-owned with others, or a homeowners association that has any authority over the property. If you're dealing with a condo, guess what? Some of these are automatic, and down below you can just put condo. It's the simplest answer. Structural modifications, alterations, or repair made without necessary permits or licensed contractors. That's the one that I'm going to get in trouble with in my house in Plymouth, since we redid the whole house pretty much. Settling, floodage, drainage, structural or grading problems. Major damage to the property from fire, wind, floods, or landslides. That landslide one gets you every time in Michigan. Any underground storage tanks? All right, here's my favorite question. Farm or farm operation in the vicinity or proximity to a landfill, airport, shooting range, etc. So how far does that landfill need to be? Or the shooting range? Everybody's definition of proximity is different, right? Now, at 5 in Sheldon, there used to be 2 prisons, a shooting range, a dump, and did I miss anything else? Or that pretty much covered everything.
Still a dump there, 5
Yeah.
here, and you can spell that for miles.
But the people living at 5.5 mile, or 3 or 4 blocks north of that, You think they're gonna check they're in proximity to a landfill? Probably not. Okay, it's just a poorly worded question. That's the only reason I bring that up. Because you could be neighbors, right? And side by side, and one of you could answer that question one way, and one of you could answer it another. And there is no right or wrong answer on that. It's too subjective. Okay, any outstanding utility assessments or fees, including any natural gas main extensions? That's one that most people don't have a clue on. And I've never seen it. I guess it could be out there. If somebody they're just bringing natural gas there and there's a cost to it, that could certainly be what they're talking about.
Could that be new construction maybe? Like in a new subdivision or something?
Doubtful in a new sub because it's probably already factored in, I would think. Most
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right, the
developers
surcharge.
would have it in there, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any outstanding municipal assessment or fees, that could be, sidewalk repairs, streets, sewers, any pending litigation that could affect the property or the seller's right to convey the property. Could be.
Worse.
Could be a divorce, could be IRS is after somebody. So there's different things. If the answer to any of these questions is yes, please explain attach additional sheets if necessary. The seller has lived in their residence on the property from blank to present. The seller's owned the property since. Now, you'd think that'd be the same, right? Not necessarily. Somebody could have owned the property from 75 and lived in the property since 85, right? They rented it for 10 years. Or they've owned it since 75 and haven't lived in it since 85 because now they're renting it since then. So you just need, in most cases, 99 times out of 100, they're going to be the exact same thing. They're not talking about if Lon closed down the hot property June 1st of 2012 and he moved in June 6th of 2012. That's not necessarily what they're talking about. All right?
What if you own it and you decide to move out and you let your daughter or somebody that you directly know live in it? Would you be still considered as living in it during that time?
No, I would put that I moved out. I mean, if you're not physically living in it, then I would say you're not living in it. Okay, the seller is indicated in the above condition of all items based on the information known to the seller. If any changes occur in the substructure, mechanical, appliance systems of this property, the date of this form, the date of closing, seller will immediately disclose the changes to buyer. In other words, if you fill this thing out and a month later, the basement floods,
Sure.
you need to go back and tell the buyer that. And they need to have that opportunity to see it. Now, what it doesn't say, again, a poorly written form, is let's say that did happen, Lon, and you fixed the problem. Does the buyer get to do anything?
I say if it's addressed, it should be informed, but if it's addressed, I don't think it changes anything.
And that's what I'm saying, it really doesn't say that. And I've never seen that situation come up where, oh my God, the basement flooded, and now I don't want the house. Now, there were probably a few of those going around last August. What do you think? During the flood? Where a lot of people, I'm sure there were a lot of pending house deals that were going on that flooded back in August. And there were probably a lot of people that said, screw it, I don't want anything to do with that house now. So I don't know what would have happened if somebody would have said, I want out of this deal because of that.
So you don't know.
I don't know. I'm not the all-knowing today.
Right, he doesn't know.
That's right. Note to self. In no event shall the parties hold the broker liable for any representation not directly made by the broker or broker's agent. So the only thing you should be doing is relaying to your client what's on this form, right? Don't hang yourself by saying, I think, I know, whatever. Seller certifies that information in the statement is true and correct to the best of the seller's knowledge as the date of the seller's signature. Buyers should obtain their professional advice and inspection of the property to more fully determine the condition of the property. These inspections should take indoor air and water quality into account, as well as any evidence of unusually high levels of potential allergens, including but not limited to household mold, mildew, and bacteria. That line on mold has changed more than anything else on disclosure in the last 20 years. One time it's on, one time it's off. Basically, they finally ruled, and it's pretty much stayed the same since at least '06, that mold affects people differently. And it's not just an end-all be-all, there's mold in the house. Every house has some type of mold, whether it's mold and mildew in the bathroom or whatever. So it is not, that's what they always will tell you, take the exterior mold, or take the exterior mold test or whatever, and the interior. Because your interior may be better than your exterior. All right? Buyers are advised that certain information compliant pursuant to the Sex Offenders Registration Act is available to the public. Buyers seeking such information could contact the appropriate local law enforcement agency or the Sheriff's Department directly. Don't ever say, well, I think there's a sex offender in this area. Okay? Let them find out. If they say, well, do you know? No, I don't know, but if you contact a local police department, they can tell you. Buyer advised that the state equalized value of the property, principal residence exemption information, and other real property tax information is available from the appropriate local assessor's office. Buyers should not assume that buyer's future tax bills on the property will be the same as the seller's present tax bill. Under Michigan law, real property obligations can change significantly when property is transferred. Again, we're on the part where it's going up. The odds are when somebody buys a house today, their taxes are going up. 6 or 7 years ago, the odds were that when you bought a house, taxes were going to go down because prices were going down.
But the longer period that a seller's owned a home and then they sell it, the more likely there is to be a bigger jump because their assessments aren't, I mean, they don't kill you year to year, they kind of...
It gradually increases,
Right.
You're right. They can only go up a certain amount. And once the assessed value can go up like this, the taxable value can only go up like this. So the longer somebody's in there, the gap gets bigger and bigger until they sell the house and the cap comes off and they're going to be equal. So the taxable value changes.
That's all on PRD, right?
Correct. All right, that's where we're breaking today. Hopefully you guys learned something.